All right, so we are up to the point where they can actually start to build the thing that they've been working on since quite a long time here. So we'll get on with the construction in 1848 on the National Mall, which I'll talk about the location of the monument in relation to the other parts there in Washington in just a few minutes. But this is when the cornerstone was laid. That's a traditional way that important buildings are built. The first stone that's laid is the cornerstone. This was a 24,500 pound block of marble, and they had a ceremony. They always do the process of commemorating the moment, and so President James K. Polk was there. Family of the founding generation, a crowd of about 20,000. They even had a bald eagle and fireworks at the cornerstone laying ceremony when they began this whole process. And so they try to make it a big deal. And so from that point, they start working on the foundation. They get the cornerstone laid, and they start cutting stones and moving them into place. They hoisted them using steam engines, so very much a 1800s type of construction going on here, because they have that ability now. But it is a slow process. It's going to it's not, there isn't exactly anything pushing them to be hasty, but usually the longer construction goes, the more it costs, and so it's just slow work, and it's going to end up continuing in much the same way for about 6 years. And then in 1854, it actually starts to peter out, and a couple of other things happen at the same time. So the donations that have been coming in to fund this project start to run out, and as projects do, if you lose funding, you can't continue construction. And so they basically just have to stop, and they're going to have to try to get more funding. So they try to work with Congress to get $200,000 to keep going. And it was close. They got close. And, if they had nothing else had happened and Congress had actually gotten the appropriations through, it's possible that this could have been wrapped up before the Civil War, but it didn't play out that way. There was some weird controversy. The at least certain sections, but good chunk of the United States this time was fairly anti-Catholic, and so there was a problem when the Pope sent over the actual Pope sent over a memorial stone for the monument. They, as important world leaders do, they often will send, as sort of a diplomatic type thing, will send these types of things to each other, or take a small part in monument building as a gesture of friendship. And so in this case, the Pope sent over a memorial stone that would be included with the monument, and the anti-Catholic movement at that point was particularly strong. And this was with the Know Nothing Party. The Know Nothings were a sort of flash in the pan. Sometimes certain segments of the political system, you just get this sort of boom, and all of a sudden there's this very active aspect that pops up, and then it will be gone a short time later. And so the Know Nothings were an anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic segment of the political system at that point, and they formed into technically a party, but they weren't in such large numbers that they could control Congress, but they did work their way into controlling this, and they became leaders in the society dedicated to creating this monument. The problem with that, excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little bit, and the problem with that is that they stir up a lot of controversy over the Pope sending this particular stone, and that just creates sort of a cascade of people not wanting to donate, and then Congress sort of backing away from it, saying, "Nah, we don't want to touch this." And so basically, Congress, at large, just decides to table the appropriations, and we'll hold on that for later. And by 1859, the Know Nothings are essentially out of gas. They get absorbed into the other parties, and just they're done. It's one of those moments in U.S. history during the 1850s, and so not much can get done. In 1858, finally, Congress takes charge and decides to absorb the society that is dedicated to creating the monument into itself. They don't want to have future takeovers to cause more problems for this project. That it's kind of a bad look to have, a third of the way completed monument in the middle of your capital city. It looks like you can't get much accomplished. And so they want to be able to make it happen. But by the time they actually get around to making it happen, the Civil War happens. And with that, nothing is going to get done as far as building monuments. There's better things to be spending money on at that point. So they had to wait till the Civil War was over, and then enough time for the country and people's will, you have a certain momentum that gets behind you to do things, and so people have to have that willingness to make things happen. And so a good moment for that to happen was 1876, because the country had gotten kicked off in 1776, and with this centennial celebration, that's an easy time for people to be excited and want to celebrate the nation's founding. And so the Congress once again appropriates the $200,000 to go towards this project. And so once again, there's a bit of a controversy. They take a look at this rather stark thing that is being created in the National Mall, and they're like, "Are we sure we really want to do this?" Like looking around at all the other monuments and the way that the city's coming together, and they go, "Do we really want to have this kind of stark obelisk right in the center of everything?" But after considering, I believe, some 5 other designs, they decide, you know what, it's going to be fine. We'll just keep going with what we've got. And so now they decide to put the management of the construction under the leadership of Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Lincoln Casey. He was of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And as you know, if you know the Corps of Engineers, they have quite a lot of tenacity and can get things done even in the harshest of environments. And so by putting them in charge of this, Congress is saying that this is going to get done. And so, or putting Casey in charge of this, that they're making sure that it's going to happen at this point. And so the first thing that they do is to work on the foundation a bit. So they want to make sure that once this is built, that it's actually going to stay up, because it'd be bad enough not to get it built, but it'd be even worse for it to get built and then you end up with a sort of a Leaning Tower of Pisa situation, or it just fall over, and that would be really an awful thing for the nation's capital for that to happen. And so here in this diagram, you see that they had the original foundation that they had built with, well before the Civil War there, and they dug out around it even further and poured new concrete to shore up, giving it a much, much wider base to, avoid problems in the future. And so they extended that quite significantly. Let's see. I don't have a measurement for this part, but you can see the relative size of it there. So make sure I didn't miss a point. So a new flagstone is added in 1880. A small ceremony is held by Rutherford B. Hayes, then president. It wasn't the grand bald eagles and fireworks type of thing that Polk had seen. But the president did scratch his initials into a coin and then lay that coin in the base that would be encased in cement. So Rutherford B. Hayes' coin is still in the monument itself. And so that was at the 150-foot level, and they've got to keep going. But that is the reason that when you look at a picture of the monument here in a little bit, take a look at the bottom third of it versus the top 2/3. It's a different color. It's slightly lighter in color. And that's because by the time that they get to the actual construction of the top 2/3, they have to go with a different quarry. And they're getting their stone from somewhere else. And if you know anything about stone, it's hard to get stones to match perfectly in color-wise if they're natural stone, and that's the challenge that they're facing. So they end up going with something that's close to get it done. So the main construction is going to take about 4 years to get this finally in place. Here's a little bit of a cutaway. You get a sense of how it all comes together structurally and the internals as well, including the concrete and all the other parts as well. And here you can see if you can actually go up in it, where you can visit and look out over DC, which is quite a thing. And the really interesting thing, right at the very top of it, is the apex of the monument itself. So this is so aluminum was a relatively new or rare metal at the time. Just wasn't, obviously we weren't doing cans of Coke and things like that yet. And so it was being used a lot for expensive lightning rods and other, that type of process. And so they end up making an apex for the monument out of 100 ounces of aluminum. And that was quite a big deal at the time. And later they're going to add more lightning rods to protect the monument even better. But at the time, this was the best idea that they had. And so around it, they have various inscriptions significant to the monument with dates and names and things like that. And it was so interesting to the people at the time that they actually, they took the apex to go into place at the monument, they actually put it on display at Tiffany's, the famous jewelry designer and seller with the robin's egg boxes that are probably more famous than anything from the store is the boxes themselves. And this was on display at Tiffany's that you could go and see. People in New York could go and see. And so it's just a neat little thing that is still an artifact of the time that still exists today. And so with that, they opened the monument, or shortly thereafter. When it's in place, and all this is in place, the top 2/3 are done, the apex is there. In 1884, it is the tallest building in the world. You wouldn't think that, given all the crazy buildings that we have today, but this is a diagram of high buildings of the old, what they call the old world. And if you look all the way up the top here, the pyramids, which are super impressive because they were built so very long ago, and they're right up here with the tallest at the time. And so right there above the pyramids is a callback to that Egyptian culture, which is the Washington Monument. So super, super impressive. And if you look through here, you might recognize a few other famous landmarks that fit in with this, the Leaning Tower of Pisa and a few others. So let me pause there, and then we'll come back and wrap up the Washington Monument.